welcome to Candid Conversations.
Yeah, round 3.
This is where we talk about the ways to get feedback and ways that make people safe to share candid things with
and the
your
importance
organization.
of feedback.
Yes. We probably need like a more snappy, this is what we're doing here, but we're talking about helping people be honest when they're sharing
Episode
feedback.
99, we'll have it down.
We'll get it. It'll be there.
We have to do 99 of these.
Today, actually. That's how this is going. As we were getting ready to do this, Mark just got an email. Mark, can you share your email with us?
Sure.
What'd you get?
So it's a shared workspace that I use for work, Spaces. They emailed me. The email is your Spaces experience. So they're wanting to get some information. I think it's my 6-month mark. I don't know if I've received any of these before. I don't know if it happens to be the 6-month mark or if just a random email that they're sending out. But I literally got it this morning. But I get emails like this all the time. I think we see it pretty much every day. But
it was interesting because I asked the question right before we started of talking about the last time we were surveyed, and you literally had a survey sitting, waiting to be taken that you hadn't done yet. Why do you think it's so ubiquitous, the request for feedback in kind of almost every commercial interaction right now? I think I get a request for feedback.
Yeah, well, it's got to be there's a ROI or someone has figured, you've got the NPS score, right?
Sure.
So promoters and detractors, but someone has figured out, caring about the people that are spending their dollars with us is a good way to get more dollars from them, is my assumption.
I think you're probably not wrong.
Yeah, that's got to be like the main reason. I wonder though, like technology's so advanced and with AI right now, they can actually gather little bits of data better than they used to. And so because of that, they're able to make more informed decisions, more educated decisions, and so much quicker. Like it just happens. So they probably know they're going to get 1 out of 100 people to actually fill out the survey, which is going to be me, only because we're actually talking about it, and I'd feel hypocritical.
Do you guys take more surveys since we started?
I take every survey. Yeah, every survey I take.
And sadly for those people sending me those surveys or that I'm taking them for, it's not so I can share. I try to be honest in them, knowing that honest feedback is important, but I'm just curious about the layout, the questions they're asking, the user experience, all that.
Oh, totally. I do the same thing. It is interesting when we think about it, like through a commercial transaction, right? There's very little fear. Like you're not worried when you fill that survey out that you're going to get kicked out of the workspace that you're working at.
Yeah.
Right. I have zero fear that when I say 1 star on my Walmart transaction after I use the self-checkout, that something bad is going to happen to me. Right. And so there's really no fear of retribution when we're dealing with commercial groups. We know that changes when you deal with public groups, but that may be why you're reluctant to share feedback. What I'm honestly really curious about is if we know that gathering feedback leads to a return on investment, why don't more public organizations, why aren't more nonprofits using tools to get feedback? One group that I think does it tremendously well because they are required to is healthcare, right?
Yeah.
I don't know the last time I went to a healthcare thing and didn't get spammed by surveys afterwards. But it almost feels like those surveys are not actually about feedback, but more about checking a requirement or a compliance box in some ways there. But I'm curious you guys' opinion of why is there that delineation? Why do nonprofits not want to do this and struggle with it?
I don't know the answer to that right off the top of my head, but one of those kind of healthcare type surveys I also recently got, frustrating thing for me, it lacked context. It was about my, at the time, 13-year-old daughter, and it was mailed to me in the mail. It was 7 pages long. And I'm just like, why am I getting this? Why is it about her, a minor? And I believe it was, I can't remember if it was from my insurance company or from the local hospital. Can't remember. But they had sent that, and I was just like, had no context. And then I also did not understand my incentive. Like, what benefit did I get in filling this out? Because it would have taken me 20 minutes, 30 minutes to go through all of that accurately.
I think actually, now that I'm looking at it, I've never thought about it this way, but I think one of the reasons that nonprofits struggle to implement a feedback system or to survey people, to do whatever, actually comes down to the fact that some commercial groups actually do it so poorly. You see, there's this implicit agreement that happens when I ask you for feedback that I'm going to do something with it to improve something. And I think we've all been in situations where it's clear you're going to use feedback to improve something. And then there's situations like your situation with your daughter where I think it would be very unclear how your information is going to improve her experience or your experience. Yeah. And that disconnect makes it feel like that process is worthless. And so if that's what we're willing to put up with in the commercial space, it's honestly not surprising that nonprofits then say, oh, we don't need to do that. That's not worthwhile.
Yeah, maybe that's a little bit of the psychology around it is, hey, we're human services, and we want this to be much more human, much more interactive, or mean something to the people that we're serving. So I can see that being one lens.
But isn't that also, going back to your question, maybe why they don't is because they're afraid of that feedback? They are afraid because of everyone's experience, especially in these vulnerable groups, must be terrible. Their experience must be terrible. I don't need to be told I'm doing a terrible job again. So why ask the question?
Yeah, if somebody's in a very bad situation, their experience is going to be bad no matter what. So why? It's a great point.
Yeah, why bother? And we hear that all the time.
It actually makes me think, as we're sitting here thinking of lies nonprofits believe about themselves that prevent them from getting feedback, right? So for one, I think one of the lies they believe is that everyone's having the same experience.
Yeah.
Right. And that experience sometimes is awful.
Yeah.
Right.
Probably.
But truthfully, there's broad spectrum of experience, even amongst people that are having some of the worst experiences you can have on this earth. And I think that's, a good reason to improve it. But what other lies do you think nonprofits believe about themselves that prevent them from utilizing the same tools that these for-profit groups are obviously having a return on their investment?
I hate to say it, but what if there's this lie of like there's no benefit to me, there's no benefit to our organization if we have data, if we can receive all this data, like what's it actually going to do?
I think coupled on top of that is the thought process of we often don't provide services that are being paid for, right? And if we're not providing services that are being paid for and they don't have any choice, it doesn't matter the feedback they give. We're just going to give the same services for everybody who cares.
So that's where my head went was, without immense amount of money, I can't make anything better anyway. I'm limited with my resources to improve things, which I think is a lie. I've seen it as a lie.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Any others that come to mind?
Probably we are gathering feedback.
Oh,
or
we're doing it. Yeah. And I don't know that that's a full lie. Maybe it's one of those kind of white lies of they're either doing it from the bare minimum compliance base, where they're gathering twice a year or whatever their grant requires. They're doing that. I kind of call it that, the fogging the mirror survey process.
That's a really interesting thing, because I think there's a distinction between gathering feedback and meeting requirements.
Checking the box.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
In the same way, there's years ago, I used to work at a tech company. Rem worked there for a while as well, that we had gym passes that were paid for us, right?
I think about this all the time.
But you had to attend the gym a certain amount of times to be able to get it paid for. And so what ended up happening.
How'd they monitor it?
So they got a report that said how many times you went to the gym.
From where?
From the gym, you go and you scan, and they send you a thing. And so there ended up being this group of people that would go scan their card at the gym and turn around and walk out.
They would end their lunch break by, all right, now we got to go over there and scan cards.
Yep, because you wanted to keep the free gym thing for
Hurry and
when
finish
we're
your
doing
fried
it.
chicken so we can go scan our cards at the gym and not work out.
Talk about crappy incentives there, but I think sometimes that's where feedback falls for many groups, many nonprofits.
Yeah.
Is it's the scanning the card at the gym, not actually exercising.
And that maybe brings up that next bigger question, and we can answer it in a different segment, but is that feedback? Are they doing feedback if that's the case? If they're checking the box, and I would argue they're doing the very first part of the feedback loop of asking the question or whatever, or the bare minimum of the feedback loop. But I'd argue that is very incomplete. So
So maybe
if you're a teacher, you get an incomplete.
Yeah, so maybe exploring that idea. What actually is required for it to be feedback? Right? Like what do we if there's the scanning the card at the gym example, and then there's actually exercising, at what point does gathering feedback turn into exercise, for lack of a better word? Like where they're actually gathering feedback, we're not just checking a box. What do you think that point is?
Yeah, I think it's the audio that's happening right now in our ears, right? There's an input and an output, and it's continuous. And if that stops, you're no longer getting feedback. You're no longer doing feedback.
Yeah, it's got to take two sides. It's got to take two people. It's got to take a back and a forth. And as soon as that back and forth stops.
Mm-hmm.
So would it be fair to say that many groups, and I don't mean to say this is nonprofit groups, but I think groups in general are actually conducting feedback theater, where it's not actually wanting to gather feedback, but they want to be seen as a group that is gathering feedback?
Yeah, it's that check in the box, fog in the mirror. Absolutely.
And
And they're doing in their minds, and that's where that lie comes in. I think all of them know they're not doing it well. And to a lot of organizations' credits that we talk to, they say, we are doing something, we're just not doing it well. Or how are you gathering feedback right now? And oftentimes the answer is not well. So we're talking about it as if it's bad. I think a lot of organizations acknowledge that, hey, we are not great at this.
yeah, I definitely agree. And coming all the way back to the commercial thing, now I find that interesting idea of feedback theater to be fascinating, because I think even lots of for-profit groups conduct that, where, who knows, maybe, Mark, that email, they want your opinion. There's another part of me that thinks they may just be internally checking a box because they want to be seen as a group that cares, and they want to be seen as a group that are doing all the right best practices. I think where real magic happens are they actually care and they actually are implementing the best practice. So it'd be interesting to see what this group is and how that translates to everybody else.
Yeah.
So
Have we seen that with some of our organizations? Have we seen the that perfect storm with the right incentives behind it, the right reasoning behind it, and then have we seen groups that we know that are doing it because they should be or because they're required to? Because in nonprofit space, there are requirements to go get feedback, right? I mean, just like healthcare there is, but same with, there are some nonprofits that
depending on the
are required
grant
to
or
go.
the funding source. Oftentimes it is driven by dollars.
Oh, totally. Well,
Right, yeah.
and I don't think that's a bad thing, right? Like,
For sure.
like when we're doing it on the commercial side, it's driven by dollars as well, just through a different mechanism. So I think the incentive to get more money is not a bad idea. I mean, more money equals more opportunity to help people and bless their lives. But I think the problem becomes when that's the only incentive, right? When all you're doing is scanning your card because you're getting some sort of benefit or money, you're not actually working out. I don't actually care how much you work out as long as you do something. I don't care how much feedback you're gathering, because then you care a little bit. There's obviously a sliding scale in there. So thinking about it reminds me a bit of, we visited an organization that were using our product, right? Using kiosks to get feedback from groups. And it was being paid for by another group. They were required to use it. We went in to find it and found it. It had been shoved into a corner, and there was like tables and stuff in front of it, so you couldn't actually get to it. Remember, I think you were
bridge to nowhere.
I think you were there. I think you remember that. But it reminds me of like they were checking the box, right? 100% checking the box. They have a feedback system that's installed, and
it was just at one location.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And the interesting thing is the reason we were there is because it wasn't gathering feedback. We were wondering what's going on. Why was this not working? And it became very clear that the lie that they were telling themselves was this isn't going to work. And they were then it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. They were then making sure it wasn't going to work because they didn't want the feedback that came through there. So we've definitely seen, totally regulatory checked, but not on the other side. Yeah. I think the other side I've seen has been the opposite where, at the beginning they do it because of regulatory reasons, but now they do it because it matters.
They saw the benefit. They trusted the process there. It really kind of going full circle back into the why should nonprofits gather feedback, and almost to the main reason of the compliance piece of it. Why are they doing it in that compliance scenario? It's for funding in most cases.
100%.
And so it reminds me of the unreasonable hospitality example of business smart versus restaurant smart. So break that down.
Sure. So in the book Unreasonable Hospitality, the author that has run multiple 5-star restaurants talks about the difference between running a business and running a restaurant. And sometimes the things that you do business-wise actually would be harmful in running a restaurant. And, conversely, when you run things well in a restaurant, it may not be what's exactly right for the business, but when the restaurant runs well, it is good for the business long term. You can't really necessarily have a good restaurant that's a business without it being an awesome restaurant, right? Like it's kind of puts the cart before the horse. But oftentimes it's easy for us to fall back into the business smart thinking, where we're thinking of how do we save money? How do we increase the bottom line? How do we do all of these things? Instead of increasing the quality, the experience, the everything else.
The customer delight.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm excited about this, or excited to go to this restaurant.
Yep. And honestly, I think because restaurant smart is hard, business smart is easier, right? It's easier to look and say, I'm just going to cut these costs and it's going to make the bottom line look better. Well, those costs are maybe associated with something that actually hurts the restaurant. And so the goal isn't necessarily to be one or the other. It's to have both of those things, to be able to apply both business smarts and restaurant smarts to be able to provide the best experience for people.
You know what example comes to my mind, it's not nonprofit, is the Costco hot dog combo. I don't know that full story, but it's the basics of it is that the founder, whoever started Costco, said hot dog combo is always going to be $1.50. Like, we're not changing that. And so that's something that's very from a business smart side of things. I'm sure there's been the bean counters, the marks of Costco that are like, hey, we need to start charging more for this hot dog combo.
We're losing money on these hot dogs.
And them saying, nope, it's a promise we made and we're sticking to it. And you get a lot of people that love Costco because they're there for some cheap food, but also they go spend money anyway. And they have a minimum that's actually a much more than $1.50 hot dog because they're paying for their membership at Costco as well.
Oh, totally. And walking into Costco, I dare you to walk into Costco and not spend $100, right? Like it's I don't know if it's possible. It reminds me, I saw a group that was also doing, it's the whole concept of a loss leader, right? We're going to sell something for lower than it's worth because it's going to make us up money later. Right. And because we care about that experience and people are going to continue to shop or be here because of that experience. There's a ice cream chain that's spreading all throughout Asia right now. And their whole model is the equivalent is something around 25-cent ice cream cones. And they're not like the little tiny ice cream cones you get for kids. They're like ice cream cones.
Like the Macy's Kong cones?
Yes, exactly. Like giant ice cream cones are 25 cents. And yes, they lose money on every single one that they do. But what they find is that people buy that and they buy something else. And everything else on their menu, they make great margins on.
Yeah. That's probably the IKEA restaurant
Sure. Yeah, I can't imagine
too.
IKEA is making money on their $4 meatballs. I really doubt it. But it provides a quality experience. I wonder now, applying that and thinking of nonprofits, when we think of why nonprofits should gather feedback, it's because without it, often you fall into that business smart without being restaurant smart.
Yeah. And what's the equivalent of restaurant smart in nonprofits?
Honestly, it would be probably, I think you'd call it nonprofit smart, of how do you best serve someone, not necessarily just be best serving your bottom line.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we think about that, when we're looking to best serve someone, it's not about a number, it's about an experience. How did they progress? How did they get out of whatever situation they're in? I've yet to find people that go to a nonprofit because they're in a great situation, right? They're not. You're not going to a human service provider because things are going awesome. You go there because you have a problem, and the gauge of how well one of these providers are doing is the experience of the person going there. That said, there's a bunch of numbers around those people, and if we focus on those numbers, it can be very easy to think of it as a business smart thing, which is where you get into the idea of warehousing people, of putting people through healthcare like it's a fast food thing, right? Where I saw a study the other day that
Oftentimes very quantitative, not qualitative.
Yes. I saw a study the other day that talked about the average time a doctor listens to you when you go in and talk to them about things. That the average doctor talked for something like 17 seconds before they cut you off. Now, think about that. Your goal is to be in there to convey whatever it is that is wrong with you in a way that they can then take that and do something with it. But they're not listening more than just a half minute at most. But it's because, without being careful, we become business smart. The business smart thing is to turn over people. Mm-hmm. We need the next person. We need the next person because we need to be able to build. We need to be able to keep things open. And this isn't a knock on any of those people. It's a knock on a system that has incentivized business smarts over hospital smarts, over restaurant smarts, over nonprofit smarts. And so when we can re-enthrone the experience of somebody as the most important thing, then you can start making big impacts that coincidentally also tend to help the bottom line.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I was going to get with that is that question of what's the example of that? It's the nonprofit that is delighting the people that they serve so much that they become the product, for lack of better words, that their guests, clients, patients, whatever it is, can't live without. And when you become that in any market, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, if you become that delightful experience that you get a cult following over, that people can't live without, if you're a nonprofit, the money is going to flow there because it's very, very clear to funders, to grant makers that this is an effective program you have because the people will tell the stories on their own and those dollars will come in. So then you don't have to make as many business smart decisions if you don't want to.
So looping back to the conversation about scanning the cards at the gym type of thing and doing things out of compliance versus doing things out of desire to improve, when we can focus on doing the right things because we want to do those right things, right? Right things being making sure people's experience is good and listening to their feedback. The reason we listen to the feedback is because we want their experience to be good. I think that's the important thing. And maybe sometimes where, like the survey, the mark that we were looking at, that it becomes feedback theater is, do they actually want your experience to be good, or do you just want the bottom line to be higher, right? If they just want the bottom line to be higher, this is an interesting thought experiment, but think about it this way. How would those businesses react if their bottom line actually went higher the worse experience you had?
How would the business, say that question again, how would the businesses respond?
If the worse your experience was, the more money they made. Right? Would they care that you had a good experience?
No.
Right? In fact, they would be incentivized to try and make your experience be as awful as possible, right? Because their bottom line would go higher.
Yeah. In what world is that the case?
The only thing I can think of is that Oh, there's a restaurant called Dick's in San Diego where they just yell
Where
at
they're
you
just
and
mad at you.
shame you.
Yes, yes, there
And I
is
don't think anyone enjoys it, but I think you go there for the experience.
there's a novelty of it,
Yeah.
right? Yep.
Yeah.
Well, so
I was just thinking, like, dang, why don't we start a business like that?
so the interesting thing is there are businesses that exist in that vein, but it's not so much that they're incentivized to have you have a bad experience. It's that they're incentivized not to care about your experience at all, just to move you along and have the next person that come in and purchase something. I think lots of e-commerce stuff happens in this way. When you're happening at such scale, it almost doesn't matter what an individual's experience is, as so much it matters what the aggregate is, right? And you care that way. The interesting thing with nonprofits, though, is the entire equation breaks down when you desperately care about the individual involved.
Yeah. Well, because it's people, it's not a transaction, it's not an item.
Yes.
Those scale e-commerce things happen in, I would say, there's probably no human service that operates in an e-commerce type fashion.
The other important note is because it's not transactional, it also means the feedback and the situation is more circular, right? When it's transactional, Mark buys something, he gets an email, he can respond to it or not, and then you may never interact again. But his transaction's over, right? And a lot of times his interaction with the brand is over. When you're dealing with the human services, a lot of times you're offering a service and that person's still going to need service either later that day, later that week, later that month. And so they're going to keep coming back. And so their experience not only impacts that one instance, but it impacts the collective and the future instances that they're going to have. And it impacts how much they're willing to listen, how much they trust, how much they believe in the services offered to them. And so that need for feedback and need to make sure that it's not theater really is that need to help them have a better experience because these good experiences compound and build upon themselves. Where things break down is when we treat it like a transactional thing and we say, hey, it doesn't matter. Like you're one of 400 people we're seeing today. Well, yeah, but you're going to see them again tomorrow and the next day and the next day. When we apply some of those commercial things where we say it doesn't matter as much the individual experience, but more of the aggregate to the other side, then we start running into some more issues. So it is interesting. I see why maybe the lie that comes up of they're just going to be negative all the time appears there, because it is circular and it's going to take a while to build upon itself and to cause positive momentum to happen.
Yeah.
But just because it is hard doesn't mean it's not worthwhile and shouldn't be being done.
Yep.
We've talked about a few of the lies that nonprofits tell themselves to convince themselves they don't need to gather feedback. But let's maybe flip it around and talk about why they should gather feedback and some of the benefits for it. And I want to highlight one. There's a bunch here, and then there's two more I want to talk about. But this one really comes down to the fact that it is required. And we talked about how feedback being required can be a bad thing if you're just doing the theater part of it. But I want to talk about how it can be a good thing. So you guys remember years ago as we were setting up this organization, we had the opportunity to meet with a senator from Utah and talk to him about the goal of trying to get feedback from vulnerable groups, and particularly in the homeless services. And I imagine we all have varying degrees of remembrance of this, but one of the things I remember is him saying that, first of all, they had no good data on it, and in some ways weren't convinced that anyone wanted to give good data on it. Do you guys remember that conversation?
Yeah, and I could have been interpreting it in my own way, but I also was getting the vibe of, I think there is data on this, but they're not sharing it with us.
I remember it wasn't there. I could be mixing this up with something else, but that there's tons of money being thrown into this, and what's the result of all that money?
Yeah,
100%. Yeah. His root cause was not like you could, if you wanted to, interpret skepticism and frustration, but really it was, hey, I'm representing people here in this state, and I want to show them what we're getting for this money.
Yep, I definitely remember that point of the conversation of trying to get there. And so I think the point I wanted to bring up with this is one of the reasons for nonprofits to gather this type of feedback is because the people that are funding you desperately want it.
Yeah.
And it becomes a distinct differentiator where you can go and say, hey, look at us, not just doing performance theater here or feedback theater, but we are actually doing this. We actually have data on this. We have the thing that you are craving, and we can show where we're succeeding and also where we're falling short. And a lot of times I think there's that fear of we don't want to show where we're falling short, but we've found that the more we share that, the more people are willing to fund because they see where that money can go, right? It is almost disingenuous to be like, hey, everything's perfect. Please keep giving us money and give us more money. If you can say, hey, things are not going well in these various places, don't take our word for it. Look at what the feedback is that we're getting. Here's how we could use this increase of money. That funding story is a story that is much more compelling and has worked out much more. So I wanted to leave that there of your funders want this data. That's one of the, I think, important reasons for nonprofits to get it. What other reasons do we run into often that are compelling for nonprofits to actually want to gather feedback?
The one that comes to mind for me is the actual voice that you're getting from the people you serve. So I think that assumption of we're going to get negative, we talked about it earlier, the negative feedback assumption that we're only going to get negative feedback. Yes, it is a crappy situation. Most of those services that are being offered are to people that are in tough situations in life. And so their incentive to rock the boat and give you feedback is very, very low. And so the why in this is to give you a tool and to show those people that you're serving that you are vulnerable, that you actually want that negative feedback. So I think the why is making that mind shift as an organization to say, yes, we desperately need this feedback and we need to show our people that they can trust us with their vulnerabilities so that we can improve. Like it would be awesome. I would love to have every organization ask the question or state the fact, we aren't great at everything. In fact, we're not good at a lot of things. Please help us improve. What can we improve? Kind of a long question, but
I didn't have an intention of diving into the story in this podcast, but it really reminded me of years ago going to oddly enough, an awards presentation where they were filming us about what we were doing to be able to use at awards banquet later, right? Because we had won an award for some of our stuff we're doing. And as I was walking up to it, I was trying to go get lunch because I was there early, and there was a guy on the street that came up and asked for money, and I said, hey, I don't have anything, but I'll buy you lunch. Come have lunch with me. And so we went and had lunch and we were chatting, and I asked him, about the shelters that were there, and they, people that I knew, and we were talking about it. And the thing that I heard from him most prominently was they don't care. They don't actually care about me. And I thought that was tragic for a few reasons. A, because I knew those people, I knew that they did care, right? But somewhere along that line, somewhere lost in translation, he had gotten the assumption that they didn't care about him. And I think, to your point, when we're gathering feedback, we turn those voices into a useful voice to try and improve experience, but also into a voice that is on the same team as us. It's not an adversarial relationship when we try and say, hey, let's try and improve these things together. Where sometimes it feels for clients like the providers and them are not on the same page, and it is an adversarial relationship.
Yeah.
And so that just comes to mind as a good example of when we honestly gather feedback and we honestly use it, it builds a virtuous cycle of trust that shows people we care, and then they can engage in our services in a different level than they were engaging before.
I think trust is the key word there, right? Like there
100%.
isn't a trust right now. So how can we figure out how to gain that trust? And that question is pretty blunt question, and it's a pretty vulnerable question, but like, hey, I'm pretty sucky at helping you, or I'm doing a really bad job at running my organization. So can you tell me like what you think as a user of our services? What can I do better? Like,
yeah.
Just that question right there, all of a sudden, like boundaries are put down, and like there's some vulnerability there, and there's some trust that's been created already just from asking that question.
100%.
And then that trust goes to answering the question, and then the providers then fixing or trying, even the attempt or the trying to fix the problem will perpetuate that trust.
So would you say that trust is a currency that's then spent later in those relationships?
100%.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I guess in some ways you could argue that feedback, having an honest feedback system where you're really listening, you're really attempting to do stuff, makes little deposits of trust that can then be used later in those relationships when it's needed.
Yeah. And really the where my head was going on that is that those deposits of trust seem sometimes counterintuitive to an organization. It's the business smart. It's that conundrum of business smart versus restaurant smart, because to be able to get that one-on-one relationship of trust, that doesn't scale very well. That's where we have to rely on good processes and bridge that gap between restaurant smart and business smart, because it is hard sitting there with someone when you know that there's 400 other people behind them in line that need these same services. And so there is some efficiency that needs to happen too at scale. So I think that's a great place to wrap up is trust is the currency. And if you can implement some processes in human services that increase trust while still keeping you restaurant smart and benefiting the organization as well is huge.
Yeah.
So, and we think feedback is one of those things.
Definitely. I think we point out that building trust requires building a relationship, right? And it's awesome if you can build a relationship one-on-one with people. But to your point earlier, I've yet to see a human service provider that has the extra time on their hands. And so somehow they have to do this at scale. And one of the best ways to build a relationship is to listen, right? And if you're listening and gathering feedback, it helps make those deposits of trust as you go through this. So to completely wrap up here, what is something you think an organization could do right now to start building a feedback system that would have those deposits of trust, that would help build that trust and that virtuous cycle for groups, so they can use that trust in those relationships later?
I'd probably say check your headphones. Do you have an input and an output? Does it feel like feedback goes into a black hole? Is this a suggestion box on the wall? Just check if it's not a loop, and you're not closing that, then that's where you start, I think.
How about
evaluate that.
How about what question to actually ask? Are you asking the right question?
Yeah, I guess the other one I was thinking is, how trustworthy is your process? Is it a trust builder or a trust breaker?
And I would think about it coming all the way back around is how earnest is your process, right? Do you, and I think it's just a good check of, are you too business smart right now? Do you need to be a little more restaurant smart?
Yeah,
right. In the work that you're doing. And I think it's important to note that we all get out of whack in that thing. We all constantly need that check of, am I doing this because it's helping individuals, or am I doing this because of the numbers? Numbers are important, but if we can recalibrate on those individuals, no matter what step you're taking, it's probably going to be the right step.
Yep. There you go. There's your challenge for your organization. Go check your feedback loop. Go understand the intentions and how earnest you are in that. So there's your challenge, and we'll see you back on the next episode of Candid.